Let's skip forward just a little bit here. But again, SWAT teams are increasingly used to raid poker games, Texas Hold'em games, even charity games. One of the more surreal cases that I've ever stumbled across was a SWAT raid on a child pornography suspect in Virginia. And basically what had happened is they were monitoring the internet. They found that the person at this particular IP address was downloading child pornography. So they called up the company and they traced the IP address to a physical address, and they sent the SWAT team. Everybody knows who Cheye Calvo is, right? Got to wonder where this is going. Cheye Calvo is a sort of one of the police officers. He's an honorary deputy at several departments across the country, and including this, for some odd reason, this rural Virginia Sheriff's Department. And he happened to be in the area. So he was in the police department at the time, so they invited him to come along to the SWAT raid. It turned out they had the wrong house. The internet service provider had traced the address to the wrong house. So this poor guy, H.A. Knuckles, he's quoted in the local paper saying, "Men ran at me, dropped into the shooting position, double-handed semi-automatic pistols pointed at me, and they made me put my hands against my truck. I was at a gunpoint, searched, taunted, and led into the house. I had no idea what it was about. I was scared beyond description. And then I look up and see Cheye Calvo." Shaq, this story briefly made national news. They asked Shaq for a comment, and Shaq said, quote, "It ain't no story. We did everything right, went to the judge, got a warrant. You know, they make it seem like we beat him up or something. That never happened. We went in, talked to him, took some of his stuff, returned it, bada bam, bada bing." So, there you go. So I don't talk all night, let me skip ahead a little bit to sort of the more kind of military culture. For 150 years in this country, we've had what's called the Posse Comitatus Act, which is the idea that there should be a very firm line in this country between the police and the military. And we've had it for good reason, because I think the people who passed it 150 years ago understood that the two institutions have very different purposes, right? The job of the police, our domestic police, is to protect our rights, to protect us from one another who do us harm, but also to do so while upholding our civil and constitutional rights. The job of the military is, as one, and I have to credit this to a professor at West Point when I spoke there a few years ago who said this to me, the job of the military is to kill people and break things. Their job is to annihilate a foreign enemy. It's very dangerous to conflate those two missions. But I would argue that that's exactly what we're doing, in spirit, if not in letter, although even in letter lately, unfortunately. But the police are charged with keeping the peace while protecting our rights. So SWAT teams are unquestionably military in nature. Many of them are trained by current or former members of elite military units like the Army Rangers or Navy SEALs. As I mentioned, they use equipment that was designed for use in war. And indeed, in the overwhelming majority of SWAT deployments, they're told that they are fighting a war, right? The war on drugs. The nation's first drug czar, William Bennett, once suggested on national TV that we suspend habeas corpus for drug dealers, that we were fighting a war and they don't deserve the rights that we commonly give to other suspected criminals. He later lamented to Fortune magazine, this is a great quote, "It's a funny little war when the enemy is entitled to due process and a fair trial." So he was complaining that this isn't a real war. If it was a real war, we need to be denying these people due process. War rhetoric has really pervaded the politics of drug enforcement for 40 years. One of my favorite quotes from Ronald Reagan, he gave a speech where he declared drugs to be a threat to national security. And in that speech, he ended it by comparing the war on drugs to the World War I war of Verdun. And what's interesting about Verdun is it's known sort of in Europe as being this excruciatingly bloody, wasteful battle that droned on for days, and that was really over a completely worthless strip of land that served no strategic purpose to either side. And basically, it's sort of seen as the kind of the ridiculous lengths that governments will go to claim a victory of some kind in war. And the fact that Reagan invoked Verdun, I think, it was much more appropriate than he realized at the time. I think that's sort of what we've done with the war on drugs. I want to read another quote real quick. This is actually in reference to Mayor Calvo's case. National Review, the conservative magazine, which is actually an opponent of the war on drugs and of the police militarization that goes with it, ran a short piece sort of outlining Mayor Calvo's case and sort of expressing their disappointment in what happened. They got a letter to the editor in response from a detective from the Milwaukee Police Department. And it's really a pretty astonishing response. I mean, this is not something that this particular officer was saying to one of his friends at a bar after they were off duty. This is what he wrote to a national magazine to be published. And keep in mind, Mayor Calvo was completely innocent. The police clearly messed up and got the wrong house. He says in the letter, as a former SWAT team member and current homicide detective with the Milwaukee Police Department, I must take issue with the tone of a paragraph in your last issue. The piece addresses the Cheye Calvo incident in which police raided a Maryland mayor's home looking for drugs, killed his dogs, and restrained him and his mother-in-law. It turned out that the man was innocent. Sorry if Calvo and his mother-in-law were, and here I use scare quotes, restrained for almost 2 hours. They were obviously restrained at gunpoint. I'm not sure what the scare quotes are for. Would you rather have them be comfortable for those 2 hours and risk officer lives and safety? Calvo should be able to understand what the officers did and why they did it. Municipal police departments fight a war on the streets of this country daily. This incident should not be considered overkill, but sound police tactics. As soon as some police administrator starts to second-guess the training and experience of the officers charged with these types of investigations, someone's going to get hurt or killed. And obviously he means a police officer, because non-officers get hurt or killed in these sorts of situations all the time. Drug investigations are inherently dangerous, and so is the Monday morning quarterbacking that you were doing. So here you have a case where this was clearly a mistaken raid. The people were innocent. It was an exceptionally violent raid. They slaughtered the dogs. Mayor Calvo and his mother-in-law were restrained for 2 hours. The county officials were particularly callous about the entire situation. And you have this officer from the other side of the country writing a letter defending not just sort of the tactic in general, but the tactics in this particular raid. I think it really speaks to kind of the us versus them kind of military mindset, I think, that is set in with a lot of police officers, which is that you see this sort of loyalty, if another doctor screws up and commits malpractice on a patient, you don't see lots of other doctors who rally to their cause, right? You see that sort of thing happen in situations like the military, and increasingly with our police departments.